All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Over a Couple of Beers, live on location at Caliente Pizza Draft House. And, dude, what are you doing with this place? This is the most quiet Dogfish Head tap takeover I've ever been a part of.
That's because it's 3 days later.
So we have to break the news to everybody. The whole point of what we were going to do with this show is to sit down with owner Nick Bogacz from Caliente down in Bloomfield on Sunday during the Dogfish Head tap takeover. And unbeknownst to us, and it's really stupid that we didn't think it would be as crowded as it was, because A, it's Caliente, and B, it's ridiculous lineup of Dogfish Head beers.
It's true.
The table we had, quote-unquote, reserved to set up our equipment for the podcast had been overrun by a wild band of Dogfish Head enthusiasts, as well as the entire bar. And in all seriousness, I think it really speaks volumes to what you guys do with Craft Beer Week and beer in general for Pittsburgh. So it was awesome to have some ridiculous worldwide stout, some 120-minute or 120-minute.
2013 120-minute.
Yeah. So we are now on location at Caliente Hampton in a little bit more of a quiet environment. My first question for you, Nick, first of all, thank you for joining the show this evening. My first question is, how does it feel to finally sit down after 12 straight days of running around during Craft Beer Week?
Well, it feels good. I've been sitting down for the last couple of days just trying to relax, but overall it was a blast. We had a really good time. It was a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and when we were able to pull something off like that, it just feels good.
Yeah, I know that was right. I think it was last year was when we first met, right before Beer Week, and what you guys do with those 10 days is remarkable. And talk a little bit about just the evolution of how you've used Craft Beer Week to put yourselves on the map and ultimately expand your business and make it what it is today.
Sure. Well, I think when we started getting down to what we do with the great pizza and trying to serve the great craft beer throughout Pittsburgh, we wanted to use different platforms to be able to reach mass audience and all the craft beer drinkers. And for us, it just made sense when I got a letter in the mail about 3 years ago for the second annual craft beer, but it would have been our first chance to be part of Craft Beer Week. And when we got the letter, it said about being a sponsor and going ahead and joining it. I said, well, we sell craft beer. I want to sell more craft beer. Kind of enjoy putting together events already. I said, why don't we join up with this Craft Beer Week, whatever it really is. So we went ahead and I looked at all the different levels, and I decided to be a bronze sponsor. And I thought that was the one that would get me on the back of the T-shirt, so that was the right fit. Well, when the T-shirt came out, there was, the big bars in Pittsburgh, the Fatheads and the Mad Mex were on the back of the T-shirts, and then there was us. And, when Craft Beer Week, the board was calling to kind of give us our sponsorship and everything, they didn't even know where we were to bring the sponsorship packages. They didn't know who I was or anything. They were just like, well, you want to be part of this, as long as you're writing the check, we'll go ahead and let you be part of it. But really, it was our coming out party, and it kind of opened my eyes to how busy we were for those 10 days, how I could take that and make it work for all year long. And that's where I really got into building our Facebook and our Twitter. It was all from what I saw that Craft Beer Week did for those 10 days. I kind of try to make it happen all year long, and we went from having, maybe 1 or 2 events a month to having 6 events every single month, and kind of trying to make it special throughout the whole year. So it's kind of like Craft Beer Week all year long for us. But then when we rolled into the second year of Craft Beer Week, we went and did 13 events and kind of really put us on the map and became, quote-unquote, the official headquarters, and we were a gold sponsor. And then I was asked to be on the board of Craft Beer Week as the retail representative, and I joined on just because they liked my success story, and that's kind of why they asked me to be on there. They thought it would be smart to try and bring somebody that's had so much success with Craft Beer Week. And then this past year, I felt really good. Last year we ran the 13 events. They went really well. It was so busy. And then my wife and I took a trip out to Philly Craft Beer Week about a month after ours, and we were sitting in a bar that was out in Philly late night. And I said to the bartender, I'm thinking, boy, my chest is out. We had 13 events. We're big boys. And I said, how many events did you guys have here? And they said, well, we had 18. So this year we had 18 events. so I felt like, hey, we got to, step up our game. And, we had 18 events in the Bloomfield location. We had 5 up at the Hampton location just because it was new. And that's about what we had the first year in Bloomfield was 5 events. So we don't want to overwhelm our staff or ourselves at Hampton. But, the things I've been hearing the last 3 days from the Hampton staff is how much Craft Beer Week really helped the new store. We're already seeing a bump these last 3 days. It's been the busiest Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday we've ever had.
That is awesome.
Everything, like all the events were packed up here. It was people that have heard about us but just never made the trek out here, and Bloomfield once again just, whatever we think we prepare for down there, it just always never ceases to amaze me how many people can really fit in there.
That first year that you guys participated in Craft Beer Week, it's kind of the same. It's kind of exactly what happened to me. That first you guys were in, I saw Caliente. I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't think I'd ever been to Bloomfield at that point either. I've lived in Pittsburgh it's been 12 years now, and I'd never been to Bloomfield. I remember seeing Caliente with all these events, things going on. I'm like, what is this Caliente? And I'm reading all these good reviews and stuff, but it actually took me until almost the second beer week to get down there, but you were on my radar, just like you're trying to do up here. You did a few events, got on the radar, people started talking about it, and then once I went finally for the first time, and to be honest with you, you guys had a Groupon or a Living Social deal or something like that. I saw, okay, Caliente, these are the guys that were doing everything for Craft Beer Week last year. I'm going to grab this Groupon and see what this is all about. Went down there, made a amazing maneuver to get the chicken wing pizza, the buffalo chicken pizza, and I have been a frequent visitor ever since, and I appreciate everything you do. I actually, of all the Craft Beer Week stuff I went to, I was at your place more than I was at any other place. In Mad Mex is right by my house, and I was at your place more than Mad Mex this year. So kudos to you for really embracing it and taking it to the next level, because I don't think anybody does more events than you do and during that week. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's kind of my goal. I guess if somebody tries to do more out here, I'll just have to do more because I just enjoy it.
Keep raising the bar. Yeah. No, I mean, we've talked about this a lot, Nick, that you've really
you have to buy the Sears next door.
Yeah, right.
You just rent out this parking lot for 10 days. I mean, you've done a remarkable job.
Look at that.
Yeah, I haven't eaten yet today, so I have to order something. What you've put together is really a blueprint for what other bars can follow to get the most from Craft Beer Week. Yeah, you put in a lot of extra time to do it. Yeah, you're doing, there's a lot of extra effort, a lot more manpower goes into it, but end of the day is the result of what it does for your business throughout the rest of the year and how it carries you, and that reputation has built to monumental levels here in Pittsburgh. And again, I think a lot of it comes down to the beer that you have, because that was I remember when I first launched Breaking Brews, I had wrote an article about 9 craft beer destinations in Pittsburgh, and I put it out to all the readers. Tell me your favorites, and I got some feedback on Caliente, and I had never been to Caliente yet. And I said, okay, cool. That's, based on that feedback, I was able to do a quick little write-up. Then the Stone Grapefruit Slam came, and I remember tweeting Jason that, hey, dude, they've got this beer. I hadn't seen it anywhere else in Pittsburgh. That was right around the same time that he was talking about that Groupon story.
Right.
He went down and checked it out. He's texting me from there. You got to come here. The beer selection is out of this world.
That was one of the most amazing things that I saw was the fact that you had a lot of stuff that nobody else had. Yeah. A lot of the West Coast stuff, like Port and Firestone Walker and some of that stuff that all the places I frequent, they didn't have any of that stuff, and you had that stuff, and I was able to try a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to try. I just couldn't get on. I did a beer trade with friends of mine out in the West Coast. I probably shouldn't say this on the air because it's not really legal, but I did it, got Pliny, I got all kinds of stuff like that, but the only reason I did that is because I couldn't get it here, but went to your place and you had it.
Hope everybody enjoys our last broadcast. The LCB is going to come in and shut us down now. You're a legal beer trader.
Right, I'm trading with my buddy in San Diego. Yeah, but yeah, I 100% agree. There was beer there that you didn't find. Well, and you were setting the trend, because now Port, you find places, and Firestone Walker, you'll find places. But before that, you were the only joint in town that had that stuff, and I appreciate that too. It made it even more desirable to go there.
And just to piggyback on Nick, because you would know this more than me, is that true? Were there other bars that had that stuff before you that we're not aware of, or were you
maybe
setting those trends? No, I'm asking Nick. 'Cause,
but
I mean, if
not
you,
where I went.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I was
it's been
excited.
out there. I
Yeah.
think that maybe other bars didn't embrace it like I embraced it. But the cool thing about that was we're selling port, maybe 6 months before they're actually delivering in Philly. And that same beer week I was talking about, where I went out to the bar that had the 18 events out in Philly, we ran into Tommy Arthur out there, and the first place we were at, I saw him like really quick. And that was the cool thing about Philly. Like when you're out there, they have all the owners of the breweries are out there pouring beer for you, or at the events. And when I was at the second event, we ran into Tommy again, and I was telling him about how we sell his beer, and we're in Pittsburgh. And he said, "Well, look, we're not expanding at all. This is last May." And he said, "We're not going to expand at all, but we are thinking about possibly going to Pittsburgh because you run the truck through there to get to Philly." He said, "It's the only place in the whole country that we're thinking about expanding to." And I was telling him, like, "Hey, we really sell a lot of your beer, like all year long. You could be able to sell beer in Pittsburgh easily." So he gave me a cell phone number, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, Tommy Arthur just gave me a cell phone number and said, "Hey, after all this Philly Craft Beer Week, you can get home, call me." And I'm thinking, okay. So I called him when I got home, and I'm thinking, there's no way. And he didn't pick up. But 4 days later, he called me, and I talked to him for 45 minutes. And it was, he picked my brain on the whole Pittsburgh craft beer scene. He really did. And then 4 or 5 months after that, they came into the market fully. And the first event was when he came to Caliente in Bloomfield. Mm-hmm. And, they ended up shipping 5 of his beers into Pittsburgh for the events to kick his brand off. And we had 16 there. And 16 of his beers, and there was beers that Tommy hadn't seen for like 2 or 3 years, and he couldn't believe it. He's like, "It's one of the best events I've ever been at." He was behind a bar bartending,
Still
high-fiving
to this day,
everybody.
though, the only place I see a port is Giant Eagle. Like even when I go to frequent bars, I still don't see a lot of port. But Giant Eagle has Mongo and Shark Attack, and
I've seen some other bars talk about having Lost Abbey through Twitter, but I mean, I think you guys really were the first ones to jump on board with that,
and still do.
I
still do think is a staple in your place. Most other places may have it just as a little like, oh, we're gonna throw this in here and try it out, but you've always had it, at least as far as since I've been going there.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't discriminate against Great Liquid. Like they make great liquid, and after having Tommy in the bar, like they're great people too. They really were. He had his whole staff with him. They were very genuine. Sometimes you meet somebody and you're like, I really want to meet this person, and then you meet them and you're just kind of like big letdown. It was about 150% the other way around. I couldn't imagine how cool he really was. So, for me, I'll always sell their beer, and I'll sell a lot of it too.
Awesome. And they have very good beer.
Yeah, they do.
They have very good beer.
That's cool. So, I guess that leads into my next question. You've obviously made a lot of good contacts in order to get some of this beer. Is there a secret formula to that, or is that just...
Oh, he's not giving that out.
Well, I think it's just...
Well, I mean, putting your nose to the grindstone, was that the biggest thing? Just, keeping your ear to the street in regards to what people were talking about? Or was there some extra legwork that went into getting the reputation that allowed you to bring in some of this ridiculously good beer?
I think a lot of it's both. Like, first step is you have to have great people at your establishment working for you. And that's like number one step, because you can have everything you want to do in your head, but you can't execute it if you don't have great people working for you. So I think that's number one. And then number two is you have to go from the other side, from the bar, behind a bar, to out there onto a floor and listen to people and listen to your customers. They'll tell you exactly what they want.
Right.
And, that really, like, we shaped our bar based off of people's opinions. I'd listen to them, and they'd give me feedback on what types of glasses they like to drink out of, or, hey, we should have prices on a price list, or, just, hey, have you heard about this beer? Have you heard about that beer? I like to drink this certain type of beer. And, hey, there's a new local brewery opening up. Or, usually I hear about from our customers before you'd read it anywhere else. And that was a lot of what it was. And then the other part is, sure, like, meeting Tommy out there, and there's some other great people we met along the way that kind of goes a really far way. But I think just knowing that what we wanted to do was serve the best possible beer that we could. And if it's registered in Pennsylvania, we're going to do our best to be able to serve it at our locations. That's what it comes down to.
That's very cool. So going back a little bit to the whole discovery of Caliente, when I mentioned you in that article, you reached out to me immediately. And honestly, at that point a blogger that was just starting out, trying to find my footing and get my name out there in regards to what we could do. It meant a lot that you reached out to me and thanked me for giving you those kudos for what you had done to that point, and that is really what brought me in the next week, and I was hooked immediately. So for anybody listening out there that has not gone in to see either Caliente location, you're really missing out on a lot of not only good beer, but as I'm going to lead into my next question, your big focus was being a big pizza guy.
I'm glad you finally brought that up.
Yeah, and
the beer's great and all that stuff, but the pizza is amazing.
Outstanding.
Outstanding pizza.
Some of the best in town. So obviously you're getting both areas nailed down. What was the big I think we've talked about this in the past, how that was really what you started off as, right, as a pizza guy.
Yeah, I mean,
and it just translated over to what you're doing today.
Yeah, really, like the last 19 years I've been in the pizza business, and that's really what everything has come from. I always wanted to be able to serve my own pizza. Like that's been the goal, and not just to serve it at one location or serve it, just I wanted to be able to serve it to as many people that would want it. So I think that's still the focus. Like, I have 2 locations, and it feels great, and we're serving a lot of people pizza, but there's a lot of people that haven't heard about it. And
right.
I think that's the goal. I want everybody, wherever they live throughout the region, be able to eat a Caliente pizza. And
right.
that's the overall goal. And the beer part of it, like I just really saw that, like I was telling Jason earlier, we're back there making our cheese every day, our dough every day, our sauce every day, cutting all our vegetables fresh. And then the craft brewers are doing a very similar thing. They're picking their freshest ingredients, local ingredients. They're making everything with their hands, mixing everything. They're putting their heart and their passion into it, just like we're doing with our pizza, and it just made for a perfect marriage. And that's what we're trying to do, is take that perfect marriage and spread it across the whole entire region.
Now there was a pizza competition this past year in Pittsburgh. And didn't you guys get second place or something like that?
Yeah, so WPXI had their best pizza challenge. So we actually finished 3rd overall behind a couple that have been around for a very long time. And then 1st as far as new pizza shop.
Right.
And that really got us a lot of recognition too. Like as much as there's beer enthusiasts out there, pizza is one of those things that has a cult following too. People go drive a long way for a good pizza.
And nothing goes better with good pizza than good beer.
Yeah,
it's always been my favorite pairing. Absolutely.
Up until that point too, like I guess I was
spare
pretty
tire to prove it.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty modest up until that point too. Like anybody who owns a pizza shop will tell you they have the best pizza. They will. It's just the nature
Most
of the beast.
of them are lying.
Yeah, and I really didn't say that up until we won the contest, and I was like, we have a great pizza. It's I really believe that there's not many pizzas that I don't like. Like, I really just love pizza.
Right.
And ours is a good pizza, and I think that's where we started to get that recognition. And then about a week or 2 after that, I was sitting in the bar doing some paperwork, and I never sit in the bar doing paperwork in the middle of the day. I usually go to my office, but for whatever reason, I'm doing paperwork that day in the middle of the dining room, and there's a guy eating a pizza next to me, and I said, "Hey, how's the pizza?" And he said, "Oh, it's really good." He said, "I'm Scott Anthony. I write for Pizza Today," which was, to me, like pretty much one of my goals this whole time around, because we've been in the pizza business for a long time, and Pizza Today is one of those trade industry magazines that's just a big staple in the industry. And when he was in there, he's became a good friend of mine, and we've made a lot of connections through him. And then pizza icon Tony Giamatti was actually in our restaurant doing a signing for the Pizza Bible. And then from that relationship, I ended up being able to be a guest speaker at a seminar out at the International Pizza Expo back in, I guess it was March of this past year in Las Vegas. And that was really cool too. Like, it was finally, like, I've gotten a lot of beer recognition throughout the last 3 years of this journey, but it was really nice to start getting some pizza recognition, because that's kind of where I started. Yeah. Felt really good. It really did.
Yeah,
great.
I thought that event with Tony was awesome because, like you said, pizza has a cult following as well, and I never realized it was that big. Because I came down just because, And I'm a nerd in the fact that I went down there because he was on Bar Rescue, and I just wanted to meet somebody from Bar Rescue because I like that show. And I just kind of stood by the side and had a couple beers and listened to everybody pick his brain about pizza ingredients and how do you do your dough and what do you feel about this kind of sauce. And I was just like, wow, this is legit. There are
science,
people
man.
people are coming from far and wide to talk about pizza. So
now
that's
you're
really
you're
cool
originally a Vicelli's guy, right?
Well, Pizza Outlet before it was Vicelli's.
Pizza Outlet, and then let me tell everybody out there, his pizza is so much better than Vicelli's that it's not. Like the fact that you even were like, that's where you're brought up. It's amazing to see where your pizza's at because it's so much better.
Well, the thing that I think is interesting, like you mentioned that you've been in Pittsburgh for 12 years. Before that, like Pizza Outlet back in the day. Mm-hmm. So when I started there about 19 years ago, everything was fresh, made in the store.
Actually, when I first moved here, it was still Pizza Outlet.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good pizza, I got to say.
It was good at the time.
And then the transition to Vicelli's, that's when I started to kind of like waver off the path there.
Yeah, they got so when I started, they had 46 stores, and they were still all pretty much everything was made in-house. And that it was not pretty much, it was all made in-house. And then 5 years later, when I left them, they had 110 stores and everything, and they were just starting to put freezers into their stores, delivering the dough, delivering bags of vegetables and stuff. And they changed the whole brand based on trying to get bigger, basically.
That's what happens.
Yeah. But
we talk about how mass production has hurt beer. It's the same. Same
a
principles.
friend of mine was a guy that started out with Little Caesars back in the '80s when it was the same way. They did the same thing. Everything was fresh. Everything they did right there. They did their own dough. They did the whole thing, and then all of a sudden they started getting huge, and now all of a sudden it's frozen. Everything's frozen. It doesn't taste as good. Everybody's starting to get a little bit, turned off by it. They start looking to other places, and it just seems to be. And it's always been that way. That the hometown pizza joints are always the better pizza.
I remember when we were growing up in our small town of Bradford, when Little Caesars came in the first time around. That pizza was outstanding.
Yeah, it was, and then, that was late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah, when we were kids then, and then that went away, and then fast forward to the Little Caesars of today, it's night and day the difference.
Well, they're starting to make a comeback though. It's actually kind of surprising to see these guys.
Because they wrap bacon around their pizza, whatever.
Well, there's gimmicks to it, but I will not slam them completely for a $5 pizza.
No,
that's not a bad pizza. But again, I will come here and pay way more than $5 for a pizza to get a great quality pizza.
Well, that's where I look at it, and that's the point I was going to make, is that I like Vicelli's, I like Pizza Hut, I like Domino's. I really don't have anything to say badly against those pizzas. Ugh. However,
are you serious?
Well, let me finish.
Pizza Hut is the worst thing on the planet.
Let me finish.
Kind of my guilty pleasure.
Well, really? You like that?
What I was going to say before you interrupted me was the fact that when you can have so much better pizza from the local shops,
the fact that you even
being
said
one
you
of the best
liked
ones.
Pizza Hut makes me angry.
I can't believe you're so offended about this.
Oh, that's
it's
gross.
Just pizza. However,
no, it's not just pizza.
I'm going to go to Caliente any day, and that's I can't even remember the last time that I had one of those pizzas because there's so many better alternatives.
Give me a Costco take and bake before Pizza Hut any day of the week.
See, you have no skin in this argument right now when you say something like that, but nevertheless, I think what you guys are doing with good pizza is outstanding. Angie, what are you looking at?
She hates Little Caesars.
All right.
You obviously haven't had the pretzel crust pizza yet,
or the bacon wrapped pizza, because that ought to bring you in the door. Ooh.
I don't disagree with that at all.
That'll bring you in the door and give you a heart attack.
I don't disagree with that at all.
There's no question about that. So, all right. So we are beyond Beer Week. I know it's kind of a relief in regards to all the planning and then all of the actual function it takes to carry that out. You guys, you said 17 events. You raised the bar again this year. What was your favorite event?
One that started out as just an idea, probably ended up being the best one, was the pin event, where we had.
I was there.
We went for 8 pins. We ended up with 10.
Yep.
The logistics of it was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be really hard, but the local brewers are awesome. Like, we have a good relationship all year long. And when I was able to ask them, said, hey, can you fill a pin for me? They're like, no problem. A lot of them at this point in the game have their own pins, and that made it a lot easier on me. Yeah, that was awesome. A lot of them were there too. It was
My only complaint was the 3 inches on the bar that I actually had to put my beer down.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was definitely
marketing too.
Right.
You're not putting that glass down. You're going to keep it
That's
filled
true.
up.
That is very true. But
Yeah.
it was very. And actually, I was on the second day of that. I was there on that Monday, and the For Wheat's Sake was gone, and I was very upset about that. But that was also the best beer of the collaboration beers of Craft Beer Week, I think, too.
Yeah.
But I definitely went and partook of that. What else did I have? I went. Oh, and the you guys had the Headhunter head shrinker.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen anywhere around here either.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that goes back to like making great relationships. We've made a really good relationship with Fatheads as well, and selling a lot of their beer, and they do a really, really good job of making sure that we kind of get some really nice stuff from them. Like we were their Hop Juju release party back in February, and then I ran by them. Hey, would you be able to fill a pimp for me for?
That's what destroyed Matt at the last podcast
Hop
with
Juju.
Brew Gentlemen.
I
The
think-
Hop Juju put him down.
I think that put us all over the edge.
Yeah, we're in a bad position because of Hop Juju.
I was a big fan again for the second straight year of the KBS tapping. That was that was where I
So
was.
what? 17 minutes last year.
Yeah,
was
in
kicked?
2014, that was where I was. That was my first of. I can't even count the number of events I came to at Caliente because that was the day that it turned me on to everything. I went in for the video game challenge, which was awesome, where brewery reps would play people at their favorite video game, and I should scratch that, reverse it. You could play your brewery rep at their favorite video game. If you beat them, they'd buy you a beer, which was a really cool concept. And that led into the KBS tapping that Saturday night, and just the utter madhouse that the bar became.
Oh, it was insane.
And
It reminded me of Sunday with the Dogfish.
yeah, I just kind of stood by the side and watched it happen and realized it was going to be tough to get a beer. And 17 minutes, I clocked it. It was crazy, and this year was just as much fun. So the pours were a little bit smaller this year to satiate more people, but it was another fantastic event. That was one of my favorites of the week.
I think a lot of that too with those type of tappings is we learned over time that one of the worst feelings is when you kick something in 17 minutes. Like it feels great that you kicked it that quick, but then you look up and you see a crowd of people that didn't be able to
Just
partake.
sad faces.
Yeah, and you feel really horrible because it's you're trying to put out a great event and want everybody to be able. Anybody that comes into our establishment, we want them to be able to take part of what happens, and that's why we kind of went to smaller pours, and you get a lot more pours out of it, but you get a lot of happier people, and then if there's a little bit of a leftover at the end, they can go ahead and drink another one.
It was a brilliant maneuver to have the 13, 14, and 15 120 minutes this year at the Dogfish Head. So there's nobody that couldn't have gotten some 120 minute.
Yeah, and even the Worldwide Stout seemed like a lot of people were, and it lasted a good bit of time too. So it was, I don't know. It was,
Well, and the mini snifters were a good idea too, because
Yeah.
any more than that would have been a problem.
Well,
that's the other thing too.
For me in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, we rolled in for the Brewers Olympics, which was amazing, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But he texted me, "Where are you?" as if the beer was going to kick. I'm like, "I'm on my way."
It had nothing to do with the beer kicking. I'm like, I can't be around this for much longer
And it
before.
was, what did I ask if you had? I was like, "Is there any 120 minute on?" The answer was,
Like, you
"There's
have
3
no
of them
idea.
and a worldwide stout."
Yeah,
I'm
you have
like,
no idea.
All right, I'll drive faster.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I will recommend to everybody, do not drink those two back to back.
Oh, I'll recommend that to everybody. That was awesome.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't enjoyed a WWE pay-per-view by myself that
Take
much
advantage.
in years.
If you plan on doing that, take advantage of Z-Trip or Uber or one of them and
No,
get
just
your
Z-Trip. We don't plug anything but Z-Trip on
Okay,
this
Z-Trip.
podcast.
Well, take advantage of Z-Trip so that you can get yourself home without having to drive, because that's a rough combination right there.
So what's on tap for 2016? You gonna up the number at both locations?
Well, one thing that we've done really good the last couple of years is putting together, like you're talking about the Dogfish Tap Takeover. We're talking about all 24 taps being dedicated to Dogfish. The year before, it was all dedicated taps being to Stone.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely on the table for next year. Being able to find a brewery that we already support all year round, and then we can kind of come to them and say, hey, we have 16 or 17 of your beers stored up. Can you fill out the rest of the lineup? And it's fun to see what they pull out for you too. It really is.
And most breweries are probably open to that, I would think, especially the ones that they're very active in the craft beer weeks and everything. And I'm excited to see who you might get next for next year.
It's fun. It really is. It's it's one of those things too. Like when you collect that beer all year round, when it comes down to them sending you the last couple, it's, sometimes you got a little bit of say of, hey, what would you want? But
Or it's a surprise.
yeah, but it's pretty cool when Dogfish says, hey, we're going to dip into Sam's stash. What do you want?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty much magic words. So, yeah, that was cool.
You imagine him like stomping around the brewery, pissed off because like, whoa, who took my 13-120 minute? God damn it!
That could be the next step up, and I think that's with Craft Beer Week continuing to evolve the way it has, we may be looking at maybe we get on the map, maybe not next year, but maybe the year after that. Who knows? Of one of these big pioneers of craft beer making a trip to Pittsburgh and coming to a Dogfish Head tap takeover. Yeah. Maybe we have Sam or Greg Cook in the house for an event like that. Imagine the house.
Listen, if Greg shows up at a Cleveland Beer Week, he sure as hell will show up to a Pittsburgh.
Sure, I mean, we're getting to that point.
That was the one thing I noticed from the Philly Craft Beer Week was going out there and we were at an event where Sam was pouring like 02 Worldwide Stout and 05 120, and then the next one where we saw Tommy. And that was something that I came back with and was like, all right, I came back saying we're going to do the 18 events because that's what somebody said they did out there. But I also came back and said I want an owner of a national brewery, a big pioneer of craft beer to be at my bar for Craft Beer Week. And we did have Tom Kehoe from the owner of Yards was at our bar for a cupcake eating contest. We had 12 Yards on tap, and Tom was there, and he brought his whole sales team. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
They were there for like 5 hours, had a blast. And he had his referee shirt on. He was
I saw
refereeing
that.
the cupcake contest. I mean, it was really fun. It was definitely a step in the right direction to have a pioneer of craft beer and somebody that really gets it. And he's really involved in Philly's Craft Beer Week. And I asked him a question. I said, hey, how many events does Yards have for Craft Beer Week? Like, what do you guys do at the brewery? And he said, well, Craft Beer Week is every week at Yards. He said, when it's Philly Craft Beer Week, we don't do anything at the brewery. We go out and we do everything for the bars. He says it's about the retailers that support us all year round. We want to bring the beer to them and be able to really give them
that makes sense.
Give them the boost.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. And Tom's on the board out there for Philly Craft Beer Week, and I was able to pick his brain about
They didn't
things.
use PCBW, did they? Because we can't have that.
No, they don't need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were first. They can do pretty much whatever they want. I mean, they are Philly Beer Week is the pioneer of all beer weeks. That's where the whole inspiration came for. I think it's in over 100 cities now that do their own beer week.
And Tom was on that very first board that created the first one. Like, this is somebody that really, I mean, he's definitely a pioneer. So it was really cool to have him in the bar. Like, it was awesome. It really was.
Yeah, I
step
saw
in the right
pictures.
direction.
It looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that's something we'll try and continue every beer week. We're going to try and always do the big tap takeover at the end, but we're also going to try and bring somebody in that that's kind of been around the game for a long
That's
time.
fantastic. Yeah, so I don't know, man. I'm very excited about what could happen next, and in regards to what you just said. Yeah, we got a lot to do during those 10 days, and that's condensed. And really what our focus has been with the Pittsburgh Craft Beer Network is making craft beer a celebration of all year. Kind of like you said, Yards does at the brewery. They're not doing special events there. They're out and about. And that's kind of the motivation behind what I'm doing here to keep craft beer, keeping people excited about craft beer year-round. You have done an amazing job of doing that 365 days a year. Yeah, Craft Beer Week can be the showcase, but those other 355 days a year, you have maximized what can go on and how that can be utilized to build your business. So talk a little bit about how you structure these events and ultimately get craft beer in the spotlight as much as you possibly can.
I think what it comes down to, honestly, is it's fun. Like, it really is. It's cool to have stuff at your establishment where people come in for that beer. Like, they are so happy to just come in for it. They get excited for the event. They get excited to be able to bring their buddies out and enjoy this special beer or whatever it may be. But it's also about those relationships. The brewery reps are really happy to be able to – they have a job to do at the end of the day. They have to be able to sell their beer. And when you're going to say to them, hey, I'll buy a bunch of kegs. Can you bring me something, this new beer you have coming out? We'll put a bunch of other beers around it and do some sort of event. Like, they're all for it. And I think seeing what those 10 days did for us 3 years ago, it made me realize that we can do this all year round. And, I think even kidding about wanting to be the one that does the most events, I think it all comes down to, really, I want the other bars to do the same thing we do. I think it builds craft beer in Pittsburgh, and that's really, my goal. I want us to be on the map and want people driving in from different cities for our beer week. And we actually did see that this year too. We have people coming in from Ohio and a couple from New York, and they tell us, "Hey, I drove an hour and a half from West Virginia to be here."
Awesome.
Like we saw that you're the place to be, and it was fun. But that's the whole goal is just to make it, like you said, craft beer all year round. Like that's a very good goal. Yeah.
Indeed.
And I think we're headed there. And things like like I said, with Craft Beer Week becoming what it is, we now know that this is a town that is going to accept that sort of thing, and it's going to keep building. As we go forward, it's going to keep getting better and better. And I'm really looking forward to what we can do, not just next year for Craft Beer Week 2016, but everything leading up to that point. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And again, with our market becoming what it is, more people are getting into craft beer. I think it's going to be great things ahead for all of us, for sure.
One thing I probably could do that I didn't even tell you before, but I kind of got the dates this morning what Craft Beer Week's going to be next year too. So, I'll plug
breaking news,
Yeah.
Exclusive.
Yeah, I'll plug the unofficial dates.
All right.
There's kind of being on the board. We had a unofficial vote, so it's the 15th to the 24th next year, which will
A
be
little earlier.
A little earlier because
only by
Almost a week.
is it going to be like a Friday to Sunday
it was
deal like it was?
same deal, but it'll be a little earlier because Easter falls the 29th of March, I believe, at the end of March, and then the Pittsburgh Marathon's going to fall the following week. I think it's maybe like May 1st or 2nd, and then the Craft Brewers Conference will be that around the 3rd to the 5th of May, right around there. So they kind of planned it right in the middle of all these big events.
That's great.
So that's what it's going to look at is like the 15th to the 24th.
That's
Great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Exclusive on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So talking, straight, reaching outside the scope of the Pittsburgh craft beer scene. Jason, you said you came across an article today that was talking about basically just the development of craft beer as a whole and some things we have.
Well, Matt Katase from Brew Gentleman talked about this on our first podcast for Craft Beer Week. He had just come back from the Craft Brewers Conference out in Oregon. And there was a lot of, actually from his point of view, was a lot of concern about the amount of private investors that were involved with the Craft Brewers Conference and how this has become. He said literally there was as many private investors there as there were brewing companies. And we got to talking a little bit, and he did mention that there's a little bit of a worry there on how this is all going to kind of pan out. And I read an article today saying that what came out of that Craft Brewers Conference is they were talking about where they wanted to be at 20% of the craft, or not the craft, but the total beer market by 2020. They're currently 11, so about a 9% growth over the next 5 years, which with the way they've been growing recently, that's not undoable, but they said there may be, to the craft beer purists, it may be a little ugly on how they actually get there.
Yeah.
And partly because of all of the private investors that were involved in the craft beer conference. And they were talking about how, they added up all the barrels and everything this year of craft beer and where they ended up. And we had this little conversation on social media about Yuengling being number one as far as craft beer goes, and I didn't consider Yuengling to be craft beer. Some other people would disagree with me, saying because they do what they do and blah blah blah. But they were considered craft beer, but Founders was disqualified from the Brewers Association this year because of 30% private investing in their company. So what generally came out of this article was the fact that craft beer is moving into a position to where the only way they're going to get to 20% is by kind of mega craft breweries. And what that means is these brewing companies are going to have to buy out a lot of the mid-level, as in wrestling we would say the mid-card guys to get there and get to the 20%. And it almost seems like not only is that what they have to do, but that's what they're being encouraged to do to get to this 20% goal that they have by 2020, which is sort of okay, I think, as long as it is the craft guys. But when it's Anheuser-Busch buying them out, it's disturbing in that case, as we've seen lately, where most notably Elysian has sold out. But I will say that Elysian came out with a statement saying that they felt like they were ahead of the rush that's going to happen. That Anheuser-Busch is planning on buying a great deal of the craft brewing companies, and they felt like, well, if we sell now, which we'll probably end up doing in 2 years anyway, we can get $50 million. But 2 years from now, when they're gobbling them up, they're going to go for less of a premium, maybe get $15-20 million for their brewery. So they just cashed out while they're getting what's good. So, it's great to see craft beer trying to get to that 20%, but it's also disturbing to see that maybe the only way they get there is by kind of doing what they always not wanted to do and consolidate and turn into kind of like the banking industry where the big guys are buying out the little guys.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the buyouts and ultimately the direction that craft beer is going, and I think where we get wrapped up a lot is how craft beer is always treated as this small grassroots type of thing, and the brewers start in their garage or in their basement brewing small batches of beer, and then they discover that they're really good at it, and then that snowball starts rolling downhill, and it becomes to where they become a small brewery. And then in some cases, we've seen it with a lot of breweries nationwide and even on a local level, that now they're brewing to a production level that rivals, nothing's going to ever rival Anheuser-Busch, but they're rivaling each other in respect. There's a lot of good beer going out, and I think ultimately that serves as an inspiration for those home brewers that now look at this and say, well, if they did it, I can do this too, because I've got some pretty damn good beer here too. We get wrapped up in this whole buyout thing because we've talked about this extensively too. Anheuser-Busch is kind of scared of what's coming next. They would not have come out with their initial jab at the Super Bowl. And again, we've known there's been shots fired behind the scenes for years, but they finally went public with it during the Super Bowl this year and talked about how craft beer is nothing but beer for the snobs, and they dissected yada, yada, yada. We all know how that story played out. But now what we're seeing is that they are doing everything in their power, and we know they have a lot of power, to step in and change the game, or probably even a better way to word it would be to keep the game as they have designed it, because they don't know another way. And I think where they're really losing sight of everything they do is the fact that kids, or I mean, you want to call them kids, but the younger generation, the ones behind us, and we came up on that kind of beer because where we grew up in the sticks, we didn't really have a lot of options. Plus, craft beer wasn't what it was. It was out there, but we didn't have the exposure to it, and we didn't really get a lot of knowledge on that product. We moved to Pittsburgh, you and I, and now we're looking at a world of beer options that is second to none.
You have to remember, though, that the one equalizer in all this is capital is not easy to come by.
No, it's not.
And that's where that big question gets asked. Do we sell out, or do we continue and possibly peter out?
We talked about this on the Brew Gentlemen podcast that we did during Beer Week, that I'm sure Elysian, when they sold out, there's a lot of pros and cons weighed. They make ridiculously good beer, but they probably had a lot to look at in regards to, is this a good decision for us or not? That statement came out that maybe they were getting ahead of the game. The point I'm driving at, and I don't want to draw this out too long, the point that I'm driving at is the fact that, like you said, the mega breweries, I think what you're going to start seeing more of, and at least to salvage some of that whole craft beer feel, at least that grassroots feel, is you'll start seeing the big breweries that have already made it to that level start stepping in, and if they feel that there's a brewery that's going to be selling out, they're going to offer a counter-offer to Anheuser-Busch or to Miller Coors just to keep it in the craft realm.
Yeah,
at least that's how I could see it playing out.
And you would hope that they don't
in essence, maybe
swallow it up.
And this is all speculation at this point, but you look at what Stone has become, you look at what Lagunitas, you look at Dogfish, you look at
Southern
Tier, all these breweries that have really made a huge success story out of themselves. Maybe they merge. No one ever saw Miller Coors merging, but they did it to fight Anheuser-Busch.
Well,
no one saw Anheuser-Busch partnering with InBev or
Well,
merging
there is a
with
craft
InBev,
beer
so-
alliance, and hopefully,
So
maybe at
that's-
some point they become powerful enough to butt heads. At least,
Perhaps.
at least give some sort of competition to, and not, they'll never be as big, but maybe at least they can throw a few bucks into lobbyists' pockets.
Yeah.
And I know that's what. Listen, Stone went into the hardest state, I think, in the union, in Virginia, to open their new brewing company, and I think, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect it was strategic because there's a whole lot of politics that are going into the beer industry in Virginia, and I think they went in there on purpose because they have not only the nuts, but they got the firepower to go in there and say, listen, stop listening to the big boys in the beer industry and start listening to us. This is good for your state. This is good for everything that happens here, and I hope they put a dent in the bureaucracy that's happening there as far as beer goes.
Well, I think that.
I say Nick comment.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I think the whole thing is like, as a beer enthusiast and even like as the bar owner, you end up loving some of these brands and you really like root for them and you enjoy everything they do and you can't wait to see the next beer they're going to put out. And then when they sell out, it's like when you were a young kid and you watch your favorite player go to the Yankees. Like, you have that type of feeling. It's
No
like,
comment.
Must be with a Yankee fan.
Yeah.
But
2 of them.
oh, jeez. That's it though. Like I feel the same way when there was those rumors that Cigar City was going to sell out. They haven't, and hopefully they won't. But they're like one of my favorite breweries. They're great people down there.
Right.
They make great liquid, and I've made great relationships there. And when I read that, I was like, oh no.
I have a new saying, by the way.
Great liquid.
Great liquid.
Yeah.
I like that saying.
So I don't know. That was just for me. Like that's how.
Well,
I
hopefully
feel.
somebody,
Yeah.
if it comes down to that, and they're in trouble, which I don't think they are at this point, but maybe that they're having issues or whatever. That maybe they look to a Green Flash or a Stone or.
I don't ever think it was a
one
question of trouble. I just think it was they were looking at an appealing product and saying we can make an offer that could potentially
Sure, and
sway them our way.
we're looking at the largest brewing company in Florida. Let's try to do and if you look at Florida, the tax laws are very lax there
And the
too.
whole
So
Growler
Anheuser-Busch
situation,
hopping
I
into
think
there.
that's been resolved,
Yeah.
but I think that for a long time they were
Right.
fighting that battle
So
too,
hopefully
which hurts.
when it comes down to it, hopefully these brewing companies at least before they sell out to the big boy throw a lifeline to one of the big guys in the craft beer, even Sam Adams. Maybe they throw a lifeline to there and say, listen, I'm in trouble. I don't want to sell it to AB or Miller Coors. Or actually, you know what? Even Miller Coors. Because they're not the evil empire that
we
Anheuser-Busch
put AB up on the Death Star.
Maybe they even look
quote,
at Miller Coors and because Miller Coors they had to merge. I guess it's Miller Molson now or Coors Molson or something now, but they had to merge to compete. So maybe they're looking into this a little bit better. But maybe they're looking at it a different eye, saying we don't want to gobble them up and shut them down. We want to gobble them up and utilize.
Yeah,
the great
they're
product
making
putting out
good
there.
beer, and we want to continue to
Right.
drive
So
that
maybe they
growth.
look in a different direction to try to combat this this thing that's happening.
Yeah, I think again, and Matt made the point on our podcast is that there is money being made in this industry now that wasn't being made even 5 years ago.
Right. That's
So
why
now
there's so many investors
Yeah,
involved.
there's investors involved. There's bankers involved. There's people that have the capital to support it because they realize it's a sound investment at this point.
Right.
We can sit here all night and speculate where this could go, but honestly, I think that if I had to guess, I think that the ones that have spoken publicly about the fact that they're going to do everything they can to maintain the reputation of craft beer as a whole. If they have the capital to do it, they're going to stick their hand in and they're going to help out where they can.
Right.
That's how I would like to see it go. However, I could be completely wrong.
We'll see.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is something I read about AB is that they're strategic to it. Also, like talking about like they want to be in different states, like they're in Washington with the one they just bought, and now they're going to go talking about trying to buy one in the South, like
Right.
Cigar City, because they want to be strategic
On
where
all
they
corners.
where they can distribute. And I think that's not so much trying to buy out ones that are hurting, but I think they're trying to be strategic in where the locations are too.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're trying to combat it any way they can.
if anything else, or if nothing else, it gives us something to talk about on a weekly podcast about beer, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to loop it back to get wrapped up here real quick before we go that route. I just enjoyed one of the collaboration beers from Pittsburgh Craft Beer Week, which was one of your beers, the East End Caliente collaboration beer, which is known as East Caliente Hop Slice. The double IPA, which was the first collaboration beer that I had of the year. And it's very, very solid. Talk a little bit about that beer, and also talk about how you are making those relationships with our local breweries to go that route, because you're the only restaurant I know that's doing that for Beer Week, which I think more breweries or more restaurants should step forward and do that, because it's really a cool thing.
Yeah, well, I think the whole thing is just making these relationships. Like, what's really cool is there's so many local breweries in Pittsburgh, and you know, the bars that get behind and support them, I think, are doing the right thing, because there's, you know, on two fronts. One, it's local, so you should support local because it's local. But going back to the catchphrase, like, a lot of these local breweries have great liquid. They really do. They're putting together some really nice beers, so it makes it easy to support them. And then by doing that, you're kind of cutting out some of these places that maybe are chains that don't sell the local beer because they have to buy from, you know, they have one beer buyer that's sitting somewhere in Ohio buying all their beers for their restaurants, and they're not buying a local beer. So kind of by buying a local beer, you create a niche as a small business owner. And then on top of that, you start making these connections with the local breweries and the brewers, and then you get brewers drinking at your bar. And, you know, brewers are great guys. They really are. They're down to earth, and they enjoy what they do, and I enjoy what I do, and we always seem to hit it off. And, you know, last year for Craft Beer Week, Matt Moniger, who at the time was the head brewer at Church Brewworks, we just hit it off, and we said, why don't we make a beer? We'll bring the team from Caliente down to Church Brewworks, and we're going to brew a beer. And Matt said, that's great. He said, why don't you guys come down? So we went down, brought 7 of our guys from Caliente, and Matt said, I said to Matt, I said, hey, we're going to bring some of our pizza down and cook it in your wood-fired ovens. Would that be cool? And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. So when we were there brewing the beer, we cooked the pizza in the oven, and it was amazing. And then Matt said, why don't you guys come in the day before when we release this beer at church and cook your pizza in our pizza oven? We'll release the beer we made together, and then the next night we'll come up to your place and release the beer. So that was last year's event. We made Hop Confession, and it was awesome. And then fast forward to this year, Matt's now our head bartender here at the Hampton location, and he works for us. And Matt's got, you know, on top of me being a bar owner and making great relationships, I've got a former head brewer here in Pittsburgh that has, you know, years of relationships. So he was able to reach out to Scott Smith at East End and say, hey, you know, Nick made a beer with me last year. It was a lot of fun, and it was good publicity for both of us. Would you be interested in us making a beer with you? And Scott was all over it. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. So we went down on a cold Monday morning. We took 7 of our guys. Not that it takes 7 people to make a batch of beer, but there's a lot of thoughts of how we wanted to make it. And we came up with this double IPA. We each picked a couple different hops that were going to be in it. Matt went back and forth on the malt grain with the malt build with Brendan, and they kind of decided what they wanted to make. And we basically opened up the bags of malts, poured them in, and dumped the hops in, did the whole process. They kind of walked us through everything. It was fun.
It is fun.
And then, you know, with the name coming up, East Caliente Hop Slice, it was like, I don't know, 40 emails back and forth. And Scott told me at the end, he's like, that's why normally I just pick the name and we don't do this chain. I mean, the list was like 20 ridiculous names. So that was probably the least ridiculous name out of all of them. Is what
do you have any, do you remember any of the ones that were ridiculous?
And there was, I don't know, it was just like, it was crazy. I really don't. But there was all kind of just goofy stuff.
Sometimes the funniest stuff is the stuff that hits the cutting room floor. So I'm sure there was some ridiculous flying back and forth.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, you know, we used a lot of lemon drop hops. So there's like When Life Gives You Lemons, and there was just a lot of ridiculous like Caliente and using East End in there and all the different word plays and a lot of different stuff. But
yeah, you guys really broke some ground with the wordplay.
Yeah.
It's never been done with beer.
Yeah, right. But overall, it was fun. You know, Scott did a great job promoting it as well. We went to the Craft Beer Week has the media day, and they were able to bring growlers of the collaboration beers, and because we only distribute the beer at East End and Caliente, it's not quote unquote an official collaboration beer.
Right.
But it was pretty cool that Scott, you know, brought the beer to the collaboration or to the media day, and we were able to get a lot of people to try it there, and we got a write up in the paper about it, and a lot of great press, and
Good.
You know, it was cool. It
Well,
really
well
was.
deserved. Yeah, and it's a great beer. Very solid job.
It's
That's
fun when
awesome.
it comes down to, like, you know, we brought pizza there for lunch, and it was a good day, and it was one of those things that, you know, I've sold Scott's beer and we might have met in passing, but it was like nice to spend time with
A brewer.
somebody. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. It was really a cool
Just be thankful
experience.
you didn't have to clean up afterwards.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much.
That's the worst part about being a brewer is the cleaning.
Yeah, he did make us label a bunch of beer while we were there, but
Oh, he put you to work.
That's
right.
not a
yeah,
terrible
that makes
trade-off.
sense.
no, it wasn't terrible though.
That's great. And speaking of the local beer scene and local breweries, Jason and I had the pleasure of attending the Brewers Olympics during Pittsburgh Craft Beer Week. This was last Sunday. This was what was planned to be our leadoff event going into the original podcast scheduled time, but then I shouldn't even say unfortunately. It just didn't happen because your event was so ridiculously good.
Oddly enough, both of them went awry.
Well, I can't say that about the Brewers Olympics. Maybe in regards to sobriety in my case, and your case too. But
And shorty shorts and froggy
that
floaters
event,
and
anybody that was at that event,
goggles, it went awry.
And-
The scary thing is I wasn't there, but I've seen a lot of pictures.
there's
And
that, and,
I
that,
couldn't
and,
believe
and that's why I think that event stood out as one of the marquee events of this year, probably by accident, because mainly what it was designed to do was be a fundraiser for Blue Canoe, which it
Right.
absolutely served that purpose. But just the sheer ridiculousness that came from that, when you got Matt from Hop Farm in the dunk tank with a pit Speedo, and James, the assistant brewer at Spoonwood, in his short shorts the whole day, and
Yep.
Andy,
Saw
the
a little
president of
too
the
much
board,
of
in
those
a tie-dye
guys.
kitty cat shirt with cut off
Smuggling
camouflage shorts.
plums.
It was insanity, and it was so much fun. But really, the point was the camaraderie that was shown amongst this craft beer community and all the brewers that, you know, in essence, what they're creating a beer that is, they are competing against one another, but I've talked to a lot of brewers about this, is that it's done in a good-spirited way. Everybody wants to make a better beer.
There's room for everybody.
Exactly, and they realize that, and when they can all come together and have this kind of event for a great cause, and thanks to the generosity of everybody that was there, over $1,000 was raised for Blue Canoe's rebuild, they were affected by the fire in Titusville about 6 weeks ago. That was tremendous, and there was fun that entire 5-hour period. It was just such a good time, front to back. Thanks to the guys at Grist House for holding an absolutely unbelievable event. The events were just crazy fun to watch. There's a lot of I took, I think, 6 or 7 videos that I have uploaded on the PCBN YouTube page, and I did a full write-up on that of everything that happened.
Shout
that
out
day.
to the steer and wheel
Steer and Wheel was
food truck. That was that's some damn good food.
Yeah, they're cranking out some great burgers and some great food for everybody. And the only thing that was unfortunate is that everybody that was represented there was supposed to have a beer that was going to be poured. Unfortunately, there was some circumstances that didn't allow that. But it was still a fantastic event, and they've already been talking about how they're going to do that again next year. And Nick, you gotta, I know you'll probably have a ridiculous tap takeover that day, but you still got to come up for a little bit to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
Real good time.
Sounds fun. Those guys just get into it. I think the thing about Craft Beer Week, too, that's finally taken a nice step forward is, Andy from Hitchhiker is the president of Craft Beer Week.
Yeah.
And has the local brewers in mind, planning a lot of Craft Beer Week. And I think that's been shown even with the Brewer Olympics. Like, it shows that having somebody on the board that really is that passionate and has something, in the game about it. Like,
Yeah, he was
it
also
matters.
wearing
Absolutely.
camouflage and a Pikachu hat.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he was.
Yeah, he went all out with the
and
costume
a tie-dye
too.
shirt with a cat on
With
it.
a kitty cat. It was pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was literally like Reddit. He was Reddit.com in a person.
And that's
That's
why,
awesome.
and that's what was cool about it, is that no one was shy. Everybody was there just being themselves. And I think when you look at that being the last day of Beer Week, especially from the brewer's standpoint, so much effort went into not only having beer ready, but to planning events and then carrying out those events. That was just a day for everyone to kick back and unwind. And when you can do that, plus do it for a good cause, then again, it all came out and was exemplified with that event. So it was really a lot of fun. It was a great cap off the beer week, as was the Dogfish Head event too. And I really, again, looking forward to what 2016 is going to bring for our craft beer community. And not just that, what the rest of 2015 is going to bring, because I think Craft Beer Week is a nice catalyst for all these fun things. And we're going to see a lot of great growth over the next 12 months as we lead into 2016's Beer Week. So with that said, Jason, do you have any closing thoughts for us this evening?
No, I'm tired.
He's tired. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was in the same boat as a lot of people. It felt nice to just relax after a lot of networking, a lot of just Craft Beer Week fun and being out with everybody and talking about all the cool things we're doing with the Pittsburgh Craft Beer Network and being a part of all the fun events. Nick, I'd like to thank you personally for not just coming and sitting with us tonight, but for everything you've done to support my cause over the past year and a half. It's really been great to I feel like I made a great friend out of this and someone I can look to for advice, and what you guys are doing with Caliente is truly remarkable. Please keep up the great work.
Yeah, if you have not been here, please come here, whether it's Hampton or Bloomfield. The pizza's great, the beer's great, atmosphere is great. So please come check out his place.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I think, what's said, you guys say so many nice things about me, but I think what you guys are doing is very important too. The podcast brings awareness to a lot of different points. I thought it was really nice to sit down and talk about the end of Beer Week, but it makes sense to talk about the beer industry as a whole too.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. And then the Craft Beer Network as well is really important, because you take a week or 10 days where you promote all these events, and now there's a platform to promote these events
all year
for your bar all year long. Yeah. And that's so important. I mean, that's the whole thing that I realized 3 years ago. If I could find that platform and promote it all year long, that you could carry this wave throughout the whole entire year.
Sure.
And yours is definitely a platform we can do that at.
Well,
so
thank you. I appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up this episode of Over a Couple of Beers. Hope you all enjoyed. And next week, we've got some good episodes coming up, or at least one that will be airing next week. We're going to be meeting with Eliza Bowman from Eliza's Oven. And not only will we be doing a podcast with her and all the great baked goods she does with great craft beer from the local scene, we're also going to be doing some fun videos where she's going to demonstrate. And I got a feeling that might turn into some drinking good times.
Yeah, inner fat kids coming out.
That's going to be a lot of fun, guys. So tune in next week. Looking forward to having you back. And this has been Over a Couple of Beers, episode 12. Jason Cercone signing off.
Salutations.